Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about something that everyone in manufacturing loves to talk about, and that is their annual audit. So, as I mentioned before in a previous video, I've spent about the last 15 years or so in manufacturing, with most of that time being in quality control or quality assurance, all while being in the food manufacturing world of manufacturing. In that world, there is a philosophy or an initiative called the GFSI, or Global Food Safety Initiative, and that is a standard that is used in many companies to complete and have their annual audit. The GFSI is not an audit body by itself, but they do work on harmonizing and standardizing many other schemes that are under their umbrella. In the US, the main ones that you're going to hear about are SQF, or Safe Quality Food, BRC, which is the British Retail Consortium, and ISO, which is FSSC 22000. In my experience, I've been involved in BRC audits and or SQF audits in the US, with other ones not as prevalent, but there are others. So I want to talk for a few minutes about how the audit works. I think there's some people out there that might be interested in how an audit works at a food manufacturing company. So we're going to take the next few minutes and talk about that. So basically, an audit is done once a year. There is a lot of audits done throughout the year, but there's one main one, which is your GFSI audit that has to get done every year. And this is a big deal for companies, because if an audit does not go well and you score low, or if you score low enough to the point where you fail, there is some big impacts there. It can be the loss of customers, it can be closing of plants, it can be loss of revenue, loss of sales. A lot of things can happen if you score poorly or if you fail an audit. So you want to do your best to avoid that. So the way these audits work are, there's going to be a code or a standard. Think about those like a rule book, if you would, where the rule book or the code will tell you what has to happen. It'll have different sections and different elements that have to be completed throughout the course of the year and maintained beyond just the audit. The way that works is, generally in my experience, the quality department will help support other departments to make sure that every department that is required to follow the code or that rule book, that they're doing so. And in order to do that, you have to meet really two main criteria to be successful in that situation. One is you need to document what you're going to do and train those individuals involved in it to the point where they understand what they need to do for both food safety and quality. Again, this is in food manufacturing. And they need to be trained by somebody who has the experience and the background to train them in that. It can't just be any random person. The second part there is you need to actually do what you're saying you're going to do. So that first step is documenting and saying what you're going to do. The second part is actually doing what you said you're going to do. So what that means is, if you write a process or a procedure, if I were to watch that process or procedure, it should be very close, if not identical, to what is written on the paper. And you don't want people just doing random things. So that's how that part works. During the audit, what will happen is the auditor will show up, and depending on the size of your facility, it could be one day, it could be 5 days, it just depends, it could be longer. The auditor will do basically three things. They will report on site and go through documentation and records at varying points throughout the duration of their audit. They will conduct interviews on the floor with the employees and ask them questions like, if there's a mistake, what do you do? How do you correct documentation errors? If something goes wrong, who do you talk to? What do you do daily for quality checks or for food safety checks? Different things like that. And then the main third one will be, they will be looking for infractions or nonconformances. That's what the audit is there for. That's what they are there to do. So during the entire time of the audit, whether they're looking at documentation, whether they are walking on the floor, whether they're talking to employees, they are looking for nonconformances. Nonconformances are normal. Auditors don't necessarily don't necessarily care if you make a mistake. The really big important part is how you react to that mistake and what you did to correct it. As an example, if they were to ask an employee a question and they didn't know the answer, it's better for them to, or not better, but you want them to say, I'm not sure, I would ask my supervisor, rather than them trying to make something up and trying to, get one over on the auditor. You don't want to do that. It's better to be honest up front, and then you can make improvements from that point. So during the audit, they will continue to do their investigations and things like that. And as you go through, if the nonconformances they found are found to be true, you can pretty much bank on having that called out on your final audit report at the end of the audit. And then that will get through the process. You will have to do an investigation to figure out why that happened. You might have to do some retraining. Depending on what it is, you might need to have to do some maintenance. It all depends on what the issue was. But you will then owe a report back to the audit company to make sure that you have identified the issues, you have closed the issues, and you put things in place or processes in place so they don't happen again. So that is the gist of an audit. I'm not going to bore you with the back and forth, but what I can tell you is once the audit is complete for that year, the very next day, something really, really cool happens, and that is you get to begin planning for the audit for next year. So it is not just something that you do, a month before the audit or 2 months before the audit. Your goal should be to be audit ready every day. And that means continually looking at your systems and at your programs and making improvements and making them better, and not just waiting for things to be called out. You want to be proactive and try and prevent things from happening. That's the best advice I think anyone can really ever give anybody in manufacturing is if you can prevent problems, that will save you a lot of money and a lot of heartache down the road. So I hope I wasn't too wordy. If anybody has any questions about audit processes or different audit schemes, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to comment and I will respond as soon as I can. And I hope you all have a good day. Thanks. Bye.